Hello, DFC, and welcome back to another lesson in grade 9 English. Today we're going to be looking at the storytelling element of conflict and its importance in fiction. Every story has conflict, so today we're going to look at what it is, what are the various types of conflict, and why does conflict exist? Why does it need to exist in a story? A story that doesn't have conflict is very boring and dull. First things first, I do want you to watch this video, and then after that, for task 2, is just make another journal entry from one of the writing prompts. And you can find the journal, if you don't know where it is by now, just read the instructions. It's in the course materials section of the classwork tab. All right, so let's learn about what conflict is. So we've looked at storytelling elements like plot, character, theme, setting, atmosphere, and perspective. Now we're going to be looking at a new one called conflict. Conflict is simply the problem or difficulty experienced by the main character in the story. So it is what is stopping the main character from achieving his or her goal. And there are 5 different types of conflict. You can have human versus another human. That's a very common type. Human versus society or culture, where they're not fitting in with everyone else. Human versus nature. That's where the character is trying to struggle to survive in nature. Human versus self, where the biggest obstacle is themselves in trying to accomplish what they need to do. And then finally, the topic of today's lesson is human versus supernatural. So it's where the human is against something that is not of this world. It could be aliens, monsters, demons, ghosts, things outside of the natural world. So here's some examples of the conflict in the 4 stories that we've done so far. So Yashu tries to steal an ember from Grandfather Fire. That could be human versus human or human versus nature. Stories can have multiple types of conflict. Joe River shoots a beaver even though he just wants to take a picture of one. That's human versus self, where his goal didn't really match up with his actions. Sedna tries to escape the loon spirit but is betrayed by her father, and she seeks revenge on her dad. That could be human versus supernatural, where it's Sedna versus the loon spirit, but it's also human versus human, where she wanted revenge on her dad. And then finally, all of humanity is wiped out by the other's use of nuclear weapons. That is humans destroying humans, so human versus human conflict. So every story has a problem and characters of who the problems are between. So in this story, today's story, I want you to figure out what type of conflict it is and who the conflict is between. So for today's short story, you can find it by just clicking on this link. It's called Cannibal Woman, and it's about a Wendigo. A Wendigo is a type of mythological creature that is associated, and anyone can become a Wendigo by consuming human flesh, as the legend goes. So this is a mythological creature that is uniquely Canadian. So it appears in First Nations mythology, and it is quite popular throughout the world now. So I'd like you to read this story. It's a very short story, only 1.5 pages. So you can find it right here. That's how long the story is, very short. So if you need to read it multiple times, feel free to read it 2 or 3 times if you want. But afterward, I'd like you to answer these questions in the spaces provided. 1, imagine that you're telling the story to an audience of children trying to scare them. How would you want to tell this story to accomplish that goal? So think about how you would speak and what kind of body language you use. How would you try to scare them? You get 2 marks for that, so give me 2 ideas. Now, normally we listen to the story while I tell it to the class, but we can't do that because of the pandemic and online learning. Just imagine that you're listening to the story. Why do you think listening to someone read a story while you follow along can help people better understand a story? And then what are 3 things that you could do to help you become a better listener in class? Remember, this is all imagining that you are in class in a normal school year. Number 3, so you get 4 marks for that. Number 3, what is one similarity and one difference between your relationship with your mother and the relationship between Gotish Sawash and her mother? Gotish Sawash is the main character, and her mother is the Wendigo. So as I mentioned, so you get 2 marks for that. And as I mentioned, things like plot, perspective, theme, setting, those are in every story. Conflict is in every story. Now, why do you think conflict is necessary for a story? So why does a story need a conflict? Why does the main character need a problem that is to be solved? Number 5, what type of conflict is a story? Remember, types of conflict are up here. So which of these 5 is this story about, and who is the conflict between? And number 6 can give you a hint about that. Why do you think Gotish Sawash decided to go against her own mother? So what reasons did she have to attack her mother? And if you read the story, you'll find out. And then finally, I'd like you to read this Wikipedia entry for a person named Jack Fiddler. So a real life person. But Jack Fiddler was a Wendigo killer. So he was hired by other communities to kill Wendigos. This is a real life story. I cannot make this up. Trust me. If you're from the Sandy Lake or Deer Lake region, you may even be related to him. But read this story and tell me, do you believe that Wendigos exist? And be sure to prove and answer, prove, explain. So do these 3 things, but for the topic of Wendigos existing. So I really want you to read this story because it is a fascinating true story. So today's story actually takes place very close to Thunder Bay. So it takes place in the Quetico Provincial Park area, which is just outside of Thunder Bay. So just a nifty fact for you. You'll get 16 marks for questions 1 to 7. That should read. I'll update that. And then 4 marks for spelling, grammar, punctuation, and sentences for 20 marks in total. And as usual, if you have any questions, I'll be online every afternoon in Google Meet, so you can ask me then. But other than that, thank you again for tuning in to this lesson, and I hope you have a great day. Bye, everyone.